Good morning, everyone. Here from the Temple of Silence in Finland. This is Michael Robbins, and I'm substituting for Tuya. She usually does these broadcasts, but she's at the Arcane School conference in London, where, they're doing excellent work, and we do have to bridge between the different groups that are interested in the esoteric work and trying to advance it in the world. Well, this morning, in just about another hour and a half, we are celebrating what in the East is called the Asala Festival. We have many names for it here. The Festival of Goodwill. We have, of course, all day today, the Great Invocation Day, where we're going to try to say aloud and in groups, if possible, the great mantra for power and light, the Great Invocation, the best means we have of facilitating the right attitude towards the reappearance of the Christ and his hierarchy. This is also the Festival of the Christ, where the Christ stands before or with the entire assembled hierarchy and before Shambhala and the Buddha, and carries the aspiration of humanity up towards Shambhala, where a response will come. From Shambhala we have the beautiful energies, light, supernal, love, eternal, peaceful, silent will. So the Festival of the Christ and the Day of Dharma, I guess it's also called the Dharma Paiva, in Finnish here, the Day of Dharma. So Gemini is a sign of great diversity, and we see that in the number of tests which Hercules passes through. We're going to understand that. We'll try to spend some time on that, because all of us are Hercules. We are the incarnated soul, and we are struggling with the lower forces in order to redeem the lower energies and to take our right place on the higher planes. Now, with regard to the sign Gemini, it's a sign that is sometimes called this is from DK, Esoteric Astrology, page 347 and 348, the constellation of the resolution of duality into a fluid synthesis. Think about that. We live in a dualistic world, and so often the dualities are fighting with each other. But the fluid interconnection, the ability to pass from above to below and below to above, this fluid synthesis, and it is an intuitive sign eventually, and contributes the intuitive touch to the creation of this synthesis. Governing as it does all the pairs of opposites in the zodiac, it preserves the magnetic interplay between them, keeping them fluid in their relations. We see this in the zodiac, and Aries and Libra are like one sign in fluid synthesis, and Taurus and Scorpio, and Gemini and Sagittarius, with Pisces mediating, and Cancer, Capricorn like one sign, Leo, Aquarius, and finally Virgo, Pisces. So it keeps them fluid in their relations, and this very fluidity can contribute to instability at first. One of the mantras of Gemini is, let instability do its work. But on the other hand, I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. We've been talking about that for a number of sessions now, because there have been the lead up to this full moon day through the 3 predecessory keynotes of love, resurrection, and contact. And last night I dealt with the last sermon of the Buddha, which the Christ is said to pronounce, maybe in the Pali language, I don't know, I think so, at every gathering of the Festival of the Christ. So it's that important, it is. So we're looking at the fluidity of the opposites and Gemini, keeping them in their relations in order eventually to facilitate their transmutation into unity. And then we will have as if 6 signs with a 7th central, or a 7th point at least central. It's like the Christ in the midst of the 12. For the 2, the opposites must finally become the 1. The 2 must become the 1. And that applies very much to our life of discipleship. We have the soul and personality, the 2 must become the 1. Soul infusion, and then we will have the soul-infused personality and the monad triad, and the 2 must become the 1. And always Gemini is so very useful in this process. He goes on and he says, it should be remembered that from the angle of the final development of the 12 zodiacal potencies, the 12 opposites must become the blended 6. And this is brought about by the fusion in consciousness of the polar opposites. So sometime we will, as he says, pause and consider this phrasing, the fusion in consciousness of the polar opposites. And those who have studied astrology will realize that the opposites, though opposing in important ways, are also similar in important ways. The opposites eternally remain from the point of view of human reason. But to the initiate whose intuition is functioning, they constitute 6 great potencies, because he has achieved the freedom of the 2, as it is sometimes called in esoteric astrology, the freedom of the 2. Now, you know, when you look at the planes in the models that DK has given to us, we have 1 superior plane logoic and 6 subsidiary. And when you arrange, let's say, equal coins on a flat surface, you always have the 6 surrounding the 1, and Gemini is the energy we need, bringing in so much second ray to bring in this divine geometry, the second ray, the divine geometer. So further, you know, we're looking at this old kind of illustration here. Looks like it comes from alchemical times. Gemini, this is the force, says the Tibetan, which produces the changes needed for the evolution of the Christ consciousness. You know, it's the mutable cross, it's the common cross, it's the cross of many changes in the world leading up to the ability to sense the soul in all things, the Christ consciousness. So the evolution of the Christ consciousness at any particular point in time and space, it is always compatible to the requirements. Think about that. There comes a time at the end of the mutable cross when Pisces, also very related to Gemini, and also in the chart of Master Kutumi, Pisces, Gemini, very closely related, when Pisces is the mediating principle and helps make the transition onto the fixed cross, where we can really become disciples and begin to enter the fifth kingdom of nature. We find it also in the tarot. It is the sixth trump card, and we have here the pairs of opposites represented. Let's say soul and personality. The statement, I am one with the light, which shines through my soul, my brothers, and my master. You know, these are the kinds of mantric statements Master DK would give to his students, and they carry so much more than we might think they do. Let's change our music here a little bit. As we consider this tarot card. So it's the card of the lovers, and the soul and personality must eventually become the lovers, become fused. Fusion is constant, you know, and as the emanation retraces its step, and we are the emanation, you know, we always merge with a higher of the pairs of opposites. So there's a beautiful kind of sun card here representing the fusion that can be ongoing. And how long will it take? Well, the universe doesn't last forever, but it takes a long time. So Mercury, the first ruler of Gemini, must become one with the sun. We oftentimes hear Master DK saying it, Mercury and the sun are one. And that's a bit like telling the story of the Antakarana. Mercury is the line of light which rises towards a source. And then they fuse, the line of light, the Antakarana, fuses with the solar source, and then spins forth and sends forth yet another bridge of light. So Mercury and the sun are one, and that tells us the secret of Gemini is lying in how the pull is towards the sun. And I guess you could say that through the intuition of Mercury we learn about the isolated unity of the sun. And when we are masters, we're able to isolate the unity, and to, regardless of the variety that we have, we're always able to sense and see that unity. And even though we're not a long way from being masters, we can practice it, you know, to see the unity in all things. Last night I began a new series in Identify as Being, with lots of new words and new angles on reality. And I would say what we have to develop is not just perception, but I call it infuception. That is, to perceive that something that pervades all things. That's the real unifier. So this joyous ongoing fusion will be ours. We've been there, you know, I want to say 1,000,000 times, but you can't state any particular number. It's always more. According to Blavatsky, the great breath has always been breathing. And the contrast between universe, no universe, universe, no universe has been going on forever. So we go forth into restriction and circumscription, and into boundedness, and then we retrace our steps. And I think many of us are in that process right now, having in a way made the turn. retracing the steps of our emanation. And in terms of the illusion of time, it takes many movements for that process to be completed, and that we should return to the ultimate one in universe, the universal logos. Well, the Earth is very important when it comes to Gemini, and without the intervention of Mercury and Venus onto the Earth, there would not be the rising of humanity and the planet, because mistakes were made. In the third chain, we're told there was quite a disaster on the moon chain, and a mistake made by our planetary logos, and all the forms of lunar life could not fulfill their destiny, and so many of them were transferred then into this fourth chain where we now find ourselves. So there's a mystery here of the three together, Mercury, Venus, and the Earth, which is the field of service. And because of Mercury and Venus, as the sun works through them, or the solar logos works through them, we will begin to rise again more rapidly. Now, it's said that we have a sister planet, that is Venus. It's in a feminine incarnation. We're in a masculine incarnation, and we should be of equal development to Venus, but we're far, far from it because of this error that was made. Certain sins, and they usually have to do with premature compassion and with attachment rather than detachment. And so the great teachers come and try to teach us something so that we can begin as a race to progress more rapidly, as we should have all along. The Christ is so important in Gemini. It is a great second-ray sign. It has a constellation that's called the head of the cosmic Christ. Some of my friends who are good astrologers, they put that constellation Gemini right on top of Orion, which does not seem to have a head. And put the two together, Gemini and Orion, to get the Christ demonstration in our local cosmos system. But the Christ is, at this time, the resurrected ruler. He's passing through the 7th grade initiation of resurrection, as is the Buddha. It takes a long time to do that. Takes some thousands of years to do that. I would say the way it looks, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years, once you begin the 7th initiation to really achieve it. But there he will bring new life, life more abundantly. The air signs will be involved in that. Gemini will be involved in that. We will breathe a new air. We will breathe in the higher ethers, the cosmic ethers, and we will no longer be so stultified. Right now we're suppressed in the worlds of phenomena. The Buddha tried to help humanity realize that it must not be attached to the phenomena of the lower 18 subplanes and even the lower 21 subplanes, that life really begins on the Buddhic plane. So he maybe didn't use that language, at least popularly he didn't, but that was the gist of it. Only suffering arises from grasping for the things and the states of the lower phenomenal worlds. So he taught us how to detach, and in that state of detachment the Christ is teaching us how to love and how to spread love, so it's a great blending of the second and third aspects when we have these two brothers in Gemini, the Buddha with his third ray monad and the Christ with his second ray monad. These last several days, maybe you've been with us a little bit, we've dealt with the keynote of hierarchical love. It's not sentimental, it is really looking to support the flowering of the inner human being. It's impersonal. It's not based on sentiment or desirous attraction between one form and another. It's based on the realization that somehow not only do we love each other and are unified with each other, but that we are each other. We've also dealt with resurrection. Resurrection, the great theme of the seventh initiation, even though we popularly think of it in relation to Jesus rising out of the tomb. There's something to that also, but the real fifth initiation is called the revelation, and the seventh is called the resurrection, and we there refocus our consciousness on the logoic plane, the highest plane of all, and it is humanity which needs to be resurrected from the grave of death, the death of consciousness in which it finds itself immersed. So, the keynotes have not exactly a human meaning. They have something greater connected with them. Finally, we have the keynote of contact, and it's a closer relation between the Christ and his hierarchy and the people, and between the hierarchy and humanity. We've been dealing with all those in the preparatory period, and we have to learn how to apply them to ourselves. How shall we love? Can we indeed spread love in our surroundings? Do we improve in our ability to do so? Are we rising now? Are we going into higher and higher vibrations which are part of the resurrection process? And finally, the true contact. It's not the outer contact with the Christ in his hierarchy, and then we'll be able to have that kind of contact with our fellow human beings and with all of creation, which the Christ and his hierarchy have exemplified for us. Well, in the labors of Hercules, the Gemini labor is really an amazing one, and as I often said, thank goodness the actual drama of it was written out by the Tibetan. Only 7 of them were. I can't really think of a human being who could write it out in the way that the Tibetan did. And it's quite complex. I'm not going to read that whole thing, but there are aspects of it that we might want to go over. And there are 5 tests that Hercules meets. He fails to recognize Nereus, the intuition. He fails at first. He wrestles with Antaeus, who is a forerunner of the Hydra, and manages to take away Antaeus' power. So it's the power of glamour and illusion. And then he meets Bucyrus, whom he thinks is a great teacher. But it turns out that Bucyrus is a false teacher, and basically does not care about the teaching so much as he cares about having those who follow his way and are devoted to him. So Hercules is for a lifetime chained to the altar, and I think you meet many people that way. They're just such adherence to a certain way of thinking which we recognize, well, this is very limited, but they won't give it up, until they break their chains. That's the third aspect of the labor. We're also, it's not shown here, but Hercules descends into hell and he frees Prometheus, who is chained to the rock with the vulture pecking at his liver. There's a lot of occultism in that. And basically, Hercules is helping in such a way that the solar angels can be released to their original task. He takes over, in a way, for the solar angels and helps as the solar angels did help. Prometheus, who brought fire from heaven to man, is a symbol for the solar angels. But really what he's after, is the apples of wisdom. That's the quest in Gemini. And he knows that the great giant Atlas, who is upholding the world, on his shoulders, or carrying the burden of the world, somehow has control over the apples of wisdom. Well, you can't simply walk up to Atlas and say, give me these apples. You have to demonstrate. And what he did demonstrate is that he really helped Atlas carry the burden of the world. Well, you can see that he's becoming a member of the spiritual hierarchy when he does something like that. And in these, in this selfless act, the earth sort of rolls off the shoulders of Hercules, of Atlas, and Hercules is carrying a much bigger burden. There are so many Hercules, but the advancing souls uphold and help the planetary logos, Sanat Kumara, who is representing maybe Atlas. And finally, because of his selflessness, there is the granting of the apples. They fall into his hand. When he was in a big rush, he couldn't find the apples. When he was only thinking of himself and with the idea, I want those apples, he was too selfish to have them. You can't have wisdom when you're selfishly pursuing knowledge and wisdom only for yourself. But when he paused, when he really served, in other words, the Prometheus labor, the Atlas labor, he really delayed his quest. And in that delay there was much sacrifice, and because of it, the apples of wisdom became his. So that's, in general, the story of the labors of Hercules, and maybe I'll have time a little bit. As I say to you, I usually times all this out, and I want to give you plenty of time, in another less than an hour to be pondering. I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. So, so interesting that Gemini is one of those signs that has much to do with the angel kingdom. We can invoke the angels. Sagittarius, in its own way, has to do with the animal nature. And when the angel nature and the animal nature come together, you get human nature. So we're going to think about the invocation, invoking the angels to our aid. We know that when the Christ comes, he will bring his angels. Other masters work with different angels. The violets or devas are working with the Master Jesus, and the blue and rose-colored devas are working with Master Kuthumi, and the red and gold and white devas working with Master Moria. So, in order to redeem humanity, the intervention of the angels is really important, and in this next piece of music we'll kind of think about calling the angels through the gate of Gemini to our aid and to the aid of the upliftment of humanity. At this point, I just want to mention how many groups in the world, communicating with each other now maybe better than ever, are preparing for the festival that will be occurring, the festival of the new group of world servers from December 21st to 28th. The 2025 initiative group is doing a lot of work in that direction, and we're all assembling with it, thinking ahead about the opportunities that will be existing at that time. We last met in this way in 2012. Now it's 2019. I think we have a kind of a new moon. We don't have a full moon, but we have a new moon, I think. During that and when those events occur, the time can be very powerful. So I just want to say, I know we've got a lot going on here on the internet and these various programs, but let's, try to cooperate with each other, and as men and women of goodwill, which we surely are, and as members of the new group of world servers, which we may be. It's a pretty high calling, that, it's pretty much open to those who are initiates of the second degree, if you think of it in technical terms. Let's strengthen the hands of all the men and women of goodwill and the new group of world servers, and prepare somehow to be a very powerful, invocative agent at that time of the festival of the new group of world servers, December 21st through December 28th. There'll be meetings, there'll be in-person meetings, there'll be sharing on the internet. It's all one big world group. And so when you have a chance to participate in the preparation, then I would say, do so. Because if we all work together, then that all-important year 2020, and I keep on thinking about the optical symbolism of 2020, really seeing clearly, perfect eyesight. Maybe we will worldwide elect to our governments those who can also see and are not blinded by egotism. And maybe, that will help us enter the Aquarian age in a sounder manner, because, as DK says, there could be delay. If there is delay, it won't be forever, but it could be 300 years, he says. We don't want that. We want to enter the Aquarian age properly and with full advantage, taking full advantage of the unitive energies which are coming our way, because the hierarchy is approaching, manifesting, and the Christ is drawing nearer and nearer. And I would say within 100 years, much of that will really be underway. Well, I'd like to read a little bit from the myth of the labors of Hercules, the Gemini labor. I'm not going to do all of this. I've got quite a bit, but just go along with it and see how it applies to you, who are Hercules. You are the bright son of Hera. You are the soul. You are the soul in incarnation. What does this tell you? The great presiding one, well, the myth is called The Gathering of the Golden Apples of the Hesperides, and it's part one. The great presiding one, let's assume that's Sanat Kumara, within the council chamber of the Lord, had watched the labors of the Son of Man, who is the Son of God. That is, of course, Hercules. He and the teacher, the master, saw the third great gate into incarnation, opening before the Son of Man, revealing a new chance to tread the way. They noted how the laborer, Hercules, arose and prepared to enter on his task. Send out the word to guard the sacred tree. We have that Adam and Eve story too, don't we, about how we're not supposed to eat of the tree of knowledge lest we become immortal, and eat of the tree of life. But suffice it to say, this is all about individualization when we talk about Adam and Eve. Great mistakes are made in interpreting these things in a literal manner. But guard the tree, send out the word to guard the tree. Let Hercules up unfold the power to search without discouragement, deception, or too great a speed. Well, he goes through all those things. discouragement, deception, and, of course, he's in a hurry. Too great a speed, but he doesn't achieve his objective unless he slows down and helps others. Let perseverance now be called upon. And we're not going to find the great knowledge, the golden knowledge, or the wisdom without that perseverance. He has done well so far, and thus the word went forth. Far in a distant country grew the sacred tree. You know, a great quest is needed to find this knowledge, even though it may be within you. You don't discover that until a bit later. Far in a distant country grew the sacred tree, the tree of wisdom, and on it grew the golden apples of the Hesperides. The fame of these sweet fruits had gone to distant lands, and all the sons of men who knew themselves to be likewise sons of God desired them. So, you know, if you're an aspirant, at least an aspirant, seeking higher, with higher desire, some greater objective, then in fact you are a son of man who is likewise a son of God. So many of us are sons of men, we don't know the higher of the pairs of opposites within us. Hercules too knew of these fruits, and when the word went forth to seek for them, he sought the teacher, asking him the way to go and find the sacred tree and pick the apples. Looks so straightforward, doesn't it? I'll go on a quest for knowledge, and I'll find where it is, I'll get it, and that'll be that. Tell me the way, O teacher of my soul, the master, right? I seek the apples and I need them quickly for my use. See, there's still kind of a selfish motive there. Show me the quickest way, and I will go. Not so, my son, replied the teacher. The way is long. 2 things alone I will confide to you, and then it is for you to prove the truth of what I say. Remember, the sacred tree is guarded well. 3 maidens fair cherish the tree, protecting well its fruit. A garden, or rather, not a garden, a dragon with 100 heads protects the maidens and the tree. So, you know, the knowledge of the inner worlds, the true occult knowledge, the true knowledge of how things really are is not easily won. There are sidetracks, and let's just say that the dragon of Kundalini will have to be aroused before the real apples can fall into one's hand. The higher initiations have to be at least started. No one is going to get this kind of knowledge without passing the 3rd degree, the 4th, the 5th. And the teacher says, guard thyself well from strength too great for thee. So the thing about Hercules, first-rate soul, he's always full of confidence. He can handle anything. He learns the hard way along the path that he really can't, you know, and he suffers some defeats which give him a sense of proportion and humility. So guard thyself well from strength too great for thee, from wiles too subtle for thy comprehension. The sirens may sing and lead one astray towards what looks beautiful but ends in disaster. There's sometimes that beautiful music of the Gandharvas is considered, however beautiful it is, to be a distraction, leading one from one's goal. And these beautiful maidens, I think, symbolize something of that particular distraction. And wiles, they express wiles too subtle. For thy comprehension, watch well. The second thing, says the teacher, that I would say to thee is that thy search will carry thee where 5 great tests will meet thee on the way. Now 5 is the number of the soul, it's the upward pointing star, and in a way only the soul can gather the golden apples of the Hesperides. The personality cannot grab them for itself. Each of these tests will afford thee scope for wisdom, understanding, skill, and opportunity. Watch well. I fear, my son, that you will fail to recognize these points upon the way, but time alone will show. God speed thee in thy search. And that's so often the case, where we make a great deal out of something that's not important, and when a real test comes along, we fail to recognize it. So Hercules has to recognize the 5 tests, which will begin with Nereus, the intuition, not noticed, and lead all the way in the end to Atlas, whom he finally helps and through his humility gains the apples. God speed thee in thy search. With confidence, because success nor failure held him for him a claim, Hercules went forth upon the way. He's always, starting out pretty quickly, thinking he can handle it. He did that in Aries. He was slowed down a little bit in Taurus because he had such a tough time in Aries, and now here he is, again speeding along as you would expect in relation to a sign that has to do with Mercury and its speed. Sure of himself, he was sure of himself, his wisdom and his strength. Through the 3rd gate he passed, going due north. He's not taking care of the lower formal aspects. He's going right for the truth, so he thinks. North is the area where the higher, more austere spiritual values can be found. Throughout the land he passed, seeking the sacred tree, but found it not. All men he met he questioned, but none could guide him on his way. None knew the place. So immediately complication is appearing, and what seemed like an easy task, just go to the tree and pick the apples, is seen to be much delayed and much longer than he thought. Time passed, yet still he sought, wandering from place to place and returning oft upon his steps to the 3rd gate. And, now discouragement overtakes him. Sad and discouraged, still he sought on every hand. And of course Gemini is, like Sagittarius, a sign of great curiosity and trying to touch many factors in the environment and learn about them. The teacher, watching from afar, sent Nereus to see if he could aid. Now, who is Nereus? Okay. He is the intuition. Time and time again he came in varying form and with differing words of truth, that is Nereus, but Hercules responded not, nor knew him for the messenger he was. There's Mercury the messenger, bringing the intuition as Nereus. Skilled though he was in speech and wise, with deep wisdom of a son of God, Nereus failed. For Hercules was blind, and he did not recognize the help so subtly proffered. Returned at length with sadness to the teacher, Nereus spoke of his failure. "The first of the 5 lesser tests is passed," replied the teacher, "and failure marks this stage. Let Hercules proceed." Well, we just don't recognize the revelatory intuition when it comes. Gemini leads from a lot of instability through a lot of rationality and into the intuition, but there are tests regarding the intuition. Hercules has failed them, and how many times have we as Hercules failed the test of responding to the true intuition? Finding no sacred tree upon the northern way, Hercules turned towards the south, and in the place of darkness continued his search. The south is the place of darkness. Allegorically, it's the place of the form, where in the north we have formlessness and reality, but he didn't do so well in the north. Now he tries the south. But Antaeus, the serpent, met him on that way and wrestled with him, overcoming him at every point. So he meets a kind of monster, and his way is barred by the conflict with this serpent being, not a wise serpent being, but full of glamour and illusion. "He guards the tree," says Hercules, "this I was told. So near him must be the tree. I must break down his guard, and thus destroying him, break down and pluck the fruit." Yet, wrestling with much strength, he considered not. "Where lies my fault?" says Hercules. "Why can Antaeus conquer me? E'en when an infant I destroyed a serpent in my cot," and sometimes they say even 2 serpents. "With my own hands I strangled it, and so why should I fail now?" At least he's asking inwardly the right questions. Wrestling again with all his might, he grasped the serpent with both hands, lifting it high in the air, away from the ground, and lo, the deed was done. Well, we can see the anticipation of how he deals with the Hydra, eventually lifting it up over his shoulders and into the pure air of Booty where it withers. So he's already, exposing glamour and illusion to the air of the intuition, which maybe he's beginning to understand a little. So anyway, the deed was done, and Antaeus, who was vanquished, conquered, spoke. "I come again in different guise at the 8th gate. Prepare again to wrestle." Well, the sign Scorpio is the sign where good and evil, high and low, are in conflict with each other. It's the fighter. And Scorpio has more to do with the power of glamour than any other sign. It's also the power of intuition in humanity. So the Hydra will be met, and it's Antaeus in a more powerful guise. "I come again in different guise at the 8th gate," when Hercules is subject to Scorpio. "Prepare again to wrestle." The teacher, gazing from afar, saw all that happened. And to the great presiding one who sits within the council chamber of the Lord he spoke, reporting on the deed. The second test is passed. The danger is surmounted. Hercules did not succumb to this version of glamour and illusion. Success at this point marks his way. So he failed to recognize intuition, but at least he did not fall victim to glamour and illusion. And the great presiding one replied, "Let him proceed." Happy and confident, Hercules went on, sure of himself, and with new courage for the search. Well, Hercules has that problem. He's always a bit too sure of himself, and maybe we as disciples have to be a little more circumspect about our achievements and our possibilities, and not be proud when we maybe have one success, but we can count against it a few failures. Now to the west he turned himself, and turning thus he met disaster. This is a more conventional direction. Actually, the Christ should be found at the west. It's maybe a Libra point, and he is the Prince of Peace. He is the representative of the Spirit of Peace. He turned himself to the west, but he met disaster. How? And you know, when you see it happen in the world, it's amazing how people get taken in. He entered without thought upon the third great test, and failure met him, and for long delayed his steps. For there he met Busiris, the great arch-deceiver, son of the waters, that is related to the astral plane, of close kin to Poseidon, and we know how much Neptune can conceal and distort. Neptune, in a way, the god of glamour, but also the god of booty on a higher turn of the spiral. He meets Busiris. Now, that dweller, if not overcome, on the first ray it becomes the destroyer of souls, and on the second ray, which we're talking about now, the deceiver of souls, and on the third ray, the manipulator of souls. His is the work, that is, Busiris, to bring delusion to the sons of men through words of seeming wisdom. He claims to know the truth, and with quickness they believe. So many, even very intelligent disciples have somehow fallen into this trap. Something in them just makes that weakness possible. And we look around and we say, well, I'm not one of those, but other people looking at us may say, well, we are. This Busiris, he speaks fair words, saying, I am the teacher. To me is given knowledge of the truth and sacrifice for me. Accept the way of life through me. I know, but no one else. My truth is right. All other truth is wrong and false. Hark to my words, stay with me, and be saved. Well, we've heard a lot of people talk that way, and even conventional religion. In the preachers of the day are many Busiri, So we have to learn to recognize the true from the false teacher. Obviously, it turns out that the real teacher is within. And the people who want to hold us in prison and chain us to the altar, they're a dime a dozen, and we have to see through it. And Hercules, unfortunately, obeyed, and daily weakened on the early way, that is the third test, seeking no further for the sacred tree. He forgot his true goals and objectives, what motivated him to take off on this great quest, and he fell in with the pattern which Busiris offered. His strength was sapped. He loved and adored Busiris and accepted all he said. Well, you can never do that with a teacher. You cannot. You have to put everything to the test. And as the Buddha said, when we studied his last sermon, rely upon yourself. Rely upon yourself. So he's weakened. Weaker from day to day he grew, until there came a day when his loved teacher bound him to the altar and kept him bound throughout a year. Now, a year sounds pretty much like a lifetime, or much of a lifetime, symbolically. And the teacher lives off the strength of the weakened disciple, and it's no way to be. We just have to recognize we can't depend on anyone else. Suddenly, one day, when struggling to be free and slowly seeing Bucyrus for what he was, words spoken long ago by Nereus came to his mind. And here's the memory of what Nereus said. Truth lies within yourself. There is a higher power and strength and wisdom in yourself. Turn inwards and there evoke the strength which is the power, which is the heritage of all sons of men who are the sons of God. So occult training is beginning here, and he's told you can rely upon yourself because you have within your own nature that which is equal to and far transcends what Bucyrus can give you without the disadvantages. So silent lay a prisoner on the altar, bound to its corners for 1 whole year. Well, we're talking about the elemental life, fire, earth, air, and water. We're talking about the lower worlds. We're talking about being bound to the phenomenal worlds of fire, earth, air, and water. But Hercules is at least waking up. So he, as the prisoner, summoning his strength, he broke his bonds, seized the false teacher who had seemed so wise, and bound him to the altar in his place. He spoke no word, but left him there to learn. And we have to repudiate what is false, even though once we thought it was just the very thing that would enlighten us. You know, when the 6th-ray type discovers that the teacher has flaws, watch out, teacher, because the fall from the pedestal can be very long and hard. But basically we can learn from everybody, but the true teacher is within. The watching teacher from afar noted the moment of release, and turning to Nereus said, the 3rd great test is past. You taught him how to meet it, and in due time he profited. You know, things have to sink in. Let him go forward on the way and learn the secret of success. So 2 more stops there are for our Son of God, who is the Son of Man. 2 more steps for Hercules. Chastened, realizing his errors. Chastened, yet full of questioning, relief, Hercules continued with his search. So he continued his search, now that he was free, and wandered far. The year, incarnation shall we say, spent prone, he couldn't function, spent prone upon the altar had taught him much, and he went with greater wisdom on his way. The school of hard knocks teaches us in a way that we do not become involved again with that which limits us. And in silence, let's see here. Yes, okay. Suddenly, he halted in his steps. Now, this is the first time he's really going to attend to someone and something that's other than his own need. Suddenly he halted in his steps. A cry of deep distress smote on his ear. Some vultures circling o'er a distant rock caught his attention. Then again the cry broke forth. Should he, now this is the question, you see, and every hastening disciple has to ask himself this question. Should he proceed upon his way, or should he seek the one who seemed in need and thus retard his steps? Do I hasten on my own account, or do I apparently delay my progress to help others? He pondered on the problem of delay. A year had now been lost. He felt the need for haste. Again the cry broke forth, and Hercules with rapid steps sped to his brother's help. Now this is going to be Prometheus, the symbol for the solar angels who out of a deep service are attached to the lower worlds, much at disadvantage to themselves, tending over millions of years the progress of their subject human being. He found Prometheus chained upon a rock, suffering dire agonies of pain caused by the vultures plucking at his liver. These lower forces, so different from what the solar angel would normally experience in his own intuitional world and beyond. So it was slowly killing him, slowly killing Prometheus. We don't know until we become solar angels, and we will, what it's like to sacrifice over millions of years for the sake of an up-and-coming being. We'll find out, because maybe 85% of humanity will go on the path to Sirius and become solar angels. Maybe, as he says, the bulk of humanity tread that fourth path. He broke the binding chain and freed Prometheus, chasing the vultures to their distant lair and tending the sick man until he had recovered from his wounds. Well, this is Hercules beginning to take over the tasks which had been carried on by Prometheus, the host of solar angels, because, the solar angels are not complete avatars. They're still here somewhat for their own purpose, but they have to be liberated into the heart of the sun, or the central spiritual sun, and they will be breathed forth in groups again as planetary logoi. But this is a dramatic discussion of the release of the solar angels. Then, with much loss of time, and you can imagine how this weighed upon Hercules, he again started to make his way. The teacher, watching from afar, spoke to his seeking pupil these clear words, the first words spoken to him since he entered on this path. So we can see we're pretty much left to ourselves as we pursue the path which we must succeed in treading. The fourth stage on the way unto the sacred tree is past. There has been no delay. Now this is what would surprise Hercules, because it felt like a great delay. So when we really stop to help others and give up our craving for the great golden apples, we're actually hastening our steps. Think of the Christ, who is ahead of everybody in a way, and he stopped all the time because he was treading the path of love. The rule upon the chosen path which hastens all success is learn to serve. Now, that's a beautiful statement. Let's read that again. The rule upon the chosen path which hastens all success is learn to serve. I mean, you can be a selfish aspirant and want things for yourself, and spiritual selfishness is a stage that DK says every master is going to encounter when he calls the group together. Just because we're interested in spiritual things doesn't mean we're spiritual. The presiding one within the council chamber of the Lord remarked, "He has done well. Continue with the tests." So he served, apparently stopping his progress upon the path, but actually, could he but know it, hastening his progress. Upon all ways the search went on, and north and south and east and west the sacred tree was sought, but was not found. How long have we been looking? Maybe we individualized 21 million years ago, maybe earlier than that, if on the Earth chain. Then we awoke 18.5 million years ago, approximately, something to what we were, understood something of what we were. And millions of years have comprised our experience. A conscious search probably came in the middle of the Atlantean period. But of course, if we were individualized on the moon chain, how very much longer our quest has been, and for those who were individualized in the previous solar system, who can tell how long the quest has been. A huge and lengthy quest. There came a day when, worn with fear and traveling, he heard a rumor from a passing pilgrim on the way that near a distant mountain the tree was to be found. Now that's, the mountain of initiation, and one has to be an initiate to pluck the golden apples of knowledge and wisdom. The first true statement given him as yet, finally he was given something true, and he could follow it with success. Therefore he turned his feet to the high mountains of the east. It's all about initiation, isn't it? And on a bright and sunny day, so the mind is at work and the intuition is at work, he saw the object of his search and hastened then his steps. So it's within sight, and now he's going fast and very happy about it. "Now I shall touch the sacred tree," he shouted in his joy. "Surmount the guarding dragon and see the fair maidens of wide fame and pluck the apples." Well, they show up in the story of Helen of Troy and Paris and Menelaus. Different tests are offered to the heroes that come and seek Helen of Troy, and Paris is given the greatest test, and he's given Helen, and it starts the Trojan War. But the sisters are involved. 3 of them. They tempt us, they lead us in possibly astray if we don't see what's happening. But again, he was arrested by a sense of deep distress. Atlas confronted him, staggering beneath the load of worlds upon his back. Atlas, the spiritual hierarchy of the planet. Atlas, Sanat Kumara and his hierarchy. Atlas, the whole governing body that upholds the earth, the planetary logos, Sanat Kumara, all of the higher members of the hierarchy upholding for the sake of man and the planet this great burden. What will Hercules do? His face, that is Atlas's face, was lined with suffering. His limbs were bowed with pain. His eyes were closed with agony. He asked no help. For he saw not Hercules, but stood bowed down with pain, with the weight of the worlds. So, Hercules has the tree in sight, and here is this tremendous suffering that he encounters again. Hercules, trembling, watched and gauged the measure of the load and the pain. I guess he saw that he was really going to be needed. He forgot about his search. The sacred tree and apples faded from his mind. He only sought to aid the giant, and that without delay. So he's really choosing rightly in a selfless manner. Forward he rushed and eagerly removed the load. He's one of those who seeks to take away the heavy burden from his teacher, in this case Atlas, lifting it off the shoulders of his brother onto his own back, shouldering the burden of the worlds himself. Hercules acted from pure and selfless motive. The giant's distress was of more importance to him than his own need for the golden apples. Well, you know, this is the story that we're all going to discover. Selfishness will not bring us the wisdom we want. Spiritual ambition, it will not bring us the wisdom and the knowledge. Forward he rushed, he removed the load, shouldering the burden of the worlds himself, and other Hercules with him. He closed his eyes, bracing himself with effort, and lo, the load rolled off, and he stood free, and likewise Atlas. So his great act of selflessness made it possible for him to bear the burden easily. It no longer became a burden. He became a true world server, a high initiate. He was free because of his selflessness. Before him stood the giant, you know, the Logos, Sanakumara, and in his hand, because where else would you apply, he held the golden apples, offering them with love to Hercules. So we prove ourselves first through selflessness, and then the golden apples are ours. The search was over. The sisters three held still more golden apples and pressed them likewise into his hands. And Aigle, the fair maid, who is the glory of the setting sun, said unto him, placing an apple in his hand, "The way to us is always marked by service. Deeds of love are signposts on the way." And Eretheia, who keeps the gate which all must pass before they stand alone before the great presiding one, gave him an apple, and upon its side, inscribed in light, was writ the golden word of service. Service, service. Remember this, she said, forget it not. And lastly, Hesperus came, the wonder of the evening star, you know, Venus, Hesperus. Venus Lucifer, Venus Hesperus, it's applied to Venus, and said to him with clarity and love, "Go forth and serve, and tread the way, from henceforth and for aye, of all world servers." Before the teacher then he stood and rendered due account of all that had transpired. To him the teacher gave the word of cheer, and then with pointing finger indicated the fourth gate, and said to him, "Pass through that gate, capture the doe, and enter once again the holy place." So what a brilliant job Master Jwalkul has done in giving us that story. You know, none of us, even if we're well schooled in mythology, could have done it. And what a story it is about service and the 5 encounters. 3 of them under the influence of ignorance or selfishness, but at least the willingness to fight against something evil within us. And the last 2 really caring for the suffering of others. Well, we're approaching the moment, friends. Another 10 minutes, so we'll tune in with the Christ, whose festival it is. We have gathered in your name, Lord Maitreya, be with us. And we offer our gratitude to the Masters. We'll just think of them as they have influenced our lives in the various ways they have. We've been talking about those ways. The training from the Master DK, the strength from Master M, the wisdom of Master KH, the intelligence of Paul the Venetian, the beauty and David contact of Master Serapis, the factuality and ability to lift the veils coming through Hilarion, the former St. Paul, the idealism of Master Jesus, and we don't really have a picture here, but the unnamed seventh ray master, whose name will before long appear. The three great lords, the Manu, the Bodhisattva, the Christ that is, and the Mahachohan, guiding us all in hierarchy. And directing hierarchy and communicating with Shambhala, where they can come and go as they please. The Lords of Liberation, who are high beings in Shambhala, and who helped so much with the winning of the war that might have brought humanity down. The three Buddhas of activity, planetary logoi of the past, who help Sanat Kumara, found on each here of the rays, and Sanat Kumara himself. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have quite a bit of silence here. We have another 8 minutes before the actual full moon, and we're going to take that and enter the silence. And then when that's over, I'll play for you the Buddha's final message, which we've been talking about. But we'll be meditating. I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. So all of this done under the presence of Sanat Kumara, the Christ, the Buddha, the Masters. We'll sound the Om to attune with them. Enter this silence, and when the time comes, I'll ring the bell. It'll take a few seconds to get to you, of course. I'll ring it here at the exact time, and maybe actually a few seconds before you hear the bell will be the actual moment of the full moon, and you can check that out. So we're going to enter the silence meditating on the beautiful sign Gemini and its tests and its Christ spirit and the invocation of humanity, focus for the Christ, for us in Shambhala, and the great response of light supernal, love eternal, peaceful, silent will. Silence. this quality of the Gemini energy pours into us, pours into our groups, into humanity. We take our place within the soul of humanity. I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. Let us listen now to these words of advice from the Buddha in his last sermon. The Christ speaks it, and we will attend. We've been studying it as we go, so let us work with it now.
Unto yourselves, rely upon yourselves. Do not rely upon external help. Hold fast to the truth as a lamp. Seek salvation in the truth alone. Look not for assistance to anyone besides yourselves. Let each brother overcome the grief which arises from the body's cravings. Let each brother overcome the grief which arises from all sensations. Let each brother overcome the grief which arises from the craving due to ideas or to reasoning or to My age is now full ripe, my life draws to its close. I leave you, I depart. Relying on myself alone, relying on myself alone. myself and for others, both for myself and for others, I have done what I could do. Be earnest then, O brethren, holy, full of thought. Be steadfast in resolve. Keep watch on your own heart. Keep watch o'er your own hearts. Who wearies not, but holds fast to the truth and love, shall cross this sea of life, shall make an end of grief, shall cross this sea of life, shall make an end of grief.
And he goes on to say that the time has come for his entrance into nirvana. And these are his last words. We had a little malfunction there, but he asks everybody to be strong and vigilant, mindful, and to strive with all their might to achieve what he has achieved, relying upon himself. This is World Invocation Day. And let us then say together the great invocation, and hopefully, I do believe we'll be saying it very much today, as often as we can, out loud, or if we're by ourselves, out loud or silently, however. This is the day that all across the world humanity is calling for the light, the love, the power which will make the divine plan possible to manifest on our earth. So let us together, and if you can where you are, say it aloud with me, or if you cannot, silently then, the great invocation, the word of power for the day, the great mantram given to the Christ by Sanat Kumara when Christ decided to make that sacrifice of yet another 2,500 years and appear in person in his Maya Varupa on the lowest plains, such that every eye would see him. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. This, my friends, is what we're all working for. Our affiliation with the hierarchy didn't start just now. We've had these spiritual things in mind for a number of lives, and it's all been preparation for this time when we can act as the group John the Baptist, helping Atlas uphold the world, helping the hierarchy in our own little way, helping to bring the Christ and his hierarchy closer, ever closer, to our phenomenal worlds which are in need of redemption. Now I'd like to see, and so would we all, the Christ Spirit pervading our entire globe. It is the plan of the Christ, it is the plan of Sanat Kumara, it is the plan of the avatar of synthesis, the Spirit of Peace, and the Buddha, surrounding the Christ, that the great Spirit of love, wisdom, the soul ray of our planet will somehow do its task and change human orientation entirely until, as Master Moria says, people will vie with each other in the doing of good. They will, as they used to compete with each other to gain advantage over each other, they will now compete in the doing of good. And this is coming. I'd like to play this beautiful hymn from the 18th century that depicts the coming of Christ through the clouds and mists of glamour. It's very stirring, it's very British, and it gives an idea of what we are working for. So lo, he comes with clouds descending. time I hear that, hard to hold it together. From darkness lead us to light. I tread the way of life and light because I am a soul. With me there walk my brothers and my master. Therefore, within, without, and every side is light and love and strength. Dear friends, thank you so much for being here. You know, we still have these days of distribution coming. This is still the day of safeguarding for 12 hours on the side of the full moon, other side, and then we spread the great second ray over the next 3 days, and the ideas of love and resurrection and contact, we just keep working to bring humanity together. That's what we do. So, many blessings, lots of love from Tuya and myself, and from all the members of the University of Seven Ray Institute, Moria Federation, Blue Rose Sisterhood. You know, all of our groups, it's one group, really. One group out there, in there, seeking to bring the Christ and his hierarchy into the consciousness of humanity in the right ways, so that the reappearance can occur when it is supposed to and in the right way. So we'll just close with a piece of music. This is the Christ, and I thank you for your participation.